уважать людей, которые в Сирии.
But is there somebody who benefits from this troubled state of affairs?
Market manipulation
and a mass beheading.
Reality of the global economic
As the anniversary of the landmark Roe versus Wade decision nears, masses
7.5 million people have turned away from
The
religion.
project of each generation is to bridge the meaning of those founding words with the realities of changing times.
It's amazing to me how I can be in the most populated city in the world and still feel isolated and alone. One of the challenges is even though I'm surrounded by people, I continue to feel that my value system is just so incompatible with the value systems of those all around me. The kind of world that I'm raising my children in. How am I going to teach them right and wrong when society is teaching the exact opposite? What kind of world are they growing up in? You know, the 10 Commandments. Don't bear false witness, don't lie, don't kill, don't steal. You know, very easy ideas to grasp. But yet today in the world that we're living in, I feel that these ideas are being challenged, being questioned by everyone around me. And it makes me question, how am I actually able to adapt in a society where stealing is okay, lying is okay, killing is acceptable? Okay, stop right here. You're probably wondering, who is this guy and who in the world is he talking to? I know that if I came up to you on the street, you probably wouldn't give me the time of day, but since we're here in a video, maybe you can spare a few minutes. My name is Eugene Bach, and I host the Back to Jerusalem podcast. I live out of my backpack, and my office, it's an economy airplane seat. Why do I travel around the world? Well, you could say I have a sort of disease. But I can't sit still when I live in the space between all the bad news and the good news. I may be just another random guy with a podcast, but back to what I was saying. The Bible tells us about a time when Jesus came down to a very evil and cruel world where people were crying out for justice. And it is through his love and the actions that he taught that there began a transformation just in the few men that followed together with him. But then that transformed a people group, a nation, a continent. What can we learn from what Jesus did to transform his society? Because we desperately need it in our society today. That sounded like a sermon. What I am seeing in history and around the world today tells me that our God is not just another God, and I'm not saved just to be a part of another church program. I believe God has given us a mission, but often we can't fit it into our schedule or find a place left on our to-do list. Many of us are left standing in the space between the Great Commission and the not-so-great reality of the church in the world today. Now, I have a hunch that we already know the answers, but why does much of the church seem stale? Why are so many prayers powerless? Who wants a bigger vision? Who wants a taste of God's amazing promises? When the rubber hits the road, I have a hunch that revival is what I need. And likely, I'm not the only one. Okay, so here's the game plan. We'll look throughout history and around the world to find men and women that are absolutely ruined for God. Let's look at where revival has happened and find out where it's happening today. So where did it all start? What many would consider to be the center of the world. So I've just arrived here in Israel. Almost didn't make it. You can see that I actually travel quite a bit, so the security here, they had an issue for some of the countries that I go to. They pulled me to the side and I had to go through some pretty intense questioning for about 4 hours. But you know what? They have a right to be on edge. There's a lot of countries that are all around them that really want to destroy this place. So Israel, thank you for letting me in. What is it that makes this place so special? The Bible mentions Jerusalem nearly 1,000 times. Jerusalem holds a fascinating collision of religions, cultures, and worldviews, all with their own claims to this small piece of land in the middle of the desert. It seems to be a place of endless tradition, tension, and conflict. But is there a tendency to feel like there is more religion than faith here? Is it just tradition instead of walking with God? In my hunger to learn about revival, is this just a place for the museums? Or is God still moving in Israel today? Part of what brought me to Jerusalem is a rabbi friend of mine, Miles Weiss.
Shalom. Hello. We are Jewish, but we know that Jesus is our Messiah.
Miles is a Messianic Jewish believer who has spent his entire life taking Christians back to their Jewish roots, where he shares about the central role that Israel plays in world revival, missions, and end times. When you went to Jerusalem for the first time, was it as a Jew or as a Messianic believer?
You know, you've heard of Jerusalem syndrome, where people go to Jerusalem and they have a breakdown and they wear a white shirt and they carry a staff and they think they're Elijah and they start, you know, they flip out. Well, I had Mount Carmel syndrome, which was weeping and having God reorder my DNA around my Jewish identity and my burning desire to see the world reconciled, Jews and Arabs, Jews and Christians. I believe we're in the season, 1700 years after Constantine, where God is awakening Romans 9 through 11 for the entire world.
Miles told me that this was his signature portion of Scripture. It talks about God allowing Israel to be cut off so that the nations could be brought to faith, and that he would again bring the people of Israel back to God in his time.
If you read that literally, it is unmistakable that God has always intended this story of the Jewish people to run through history in a term of chosenness, but with the proviso and the absolute assurance that whosoever will could be grafted into that story. And that at a certain point, those of us that were broken off by unbelief would be grafted back in. And this picture of the olive tree that is so prevalent in Israel is one of the most beautiful pictures of what God's doing in the earth and what he's doing right now. I think of the misunderstanding of the word law. There's been a Marcionite heresy, really. Marcion was a first century heretic who divided the Bible into angry Jehovah, happy Jesus, bad Jews, good Christians, dangerous law, mercy and grace. But it's not that way. It's one long story. I have some friends who take that in the Christian Bible, they take out that white page between Malachi and Matthew and they circumcise it. They take a razor blade and cut out that blank page because they want to refer to it as one long story. Yeah. Somebody will say, oh, this tree is from the time of Jesus, but it's not. But it's the same guy who says shop where Jesus shopped. You know, some of these trees are 800, 1,200 years old. They're old trees. And what happens is when the tree gets old, it kind of gets hollow on the inside. And think of Israel as the old tree. And the shoots grow up from the ground, and you can actually see the striations as they wrap themselves around and become a support to the old tree. And the word for those shoots is netzer. Netzer is where we get the word Nazareth. It's where we get the word notzrim, which is the modern Hebrew word for Christian. Wow. So check this, the notzrim are the shoots that are growing up around the base of the old tree and supporting the tree. 20 years ago, when the shopkeepers would see a Christian tour come by and the Chinese would be in the street waving flags and doing what we do, the shopkeepers would say, the Nord Stream are here. Now, with a tear in their eye and a heart of gratitude, I hear them say, the Nord Stream are here. Something is changing spiritually.
Over all the time that Miles has spent here, he has seen a change in the heart of the people. It's probably hard to catch in a short visit, but one thing that is shocking for me personally is all the Chinese that are visiting Israel. It's like a Chinese invasion. They are among the many Christians that come during the Jewish holidays. In the hotel where I'm staying in, if you get up early enough, you'll hear them praying and singing for hours. One of the prominent ones among them is a man named Brother Yun. For a preacher that speaks all over the world, it may seem strange that he was just a simple farmer's son, but he is someone that has experienced God in many miraculous ways. And there's just something special about his testimony that has touched many people's lives, including my own. And I've just arrived in time for the Jewish holiday, and people from all over the world are gathered to worship at the side of the tomb where Jesus was resurrected from death.
Father in heaven, we welcome you here in the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem. And I believe most of you know that there is a major revival going on for decades now in China. The Spirit of God is moving in this country like in very few other countries around the world. And even the Chinese government recently declared, they said, we have more than 100 million Christians in our country.
我是陈胜仁，云弟兄来自中国教会。哈利路亚，哈利路亚。
I met him for the first time in 1999 before anyone really knew who he was. He didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak a lick of Chinese. Yeah, I didn't know it then, but his testimony would forever change my life.
陈胜仁这个名字不是爸爸妈妈给我的，是一次正在聚会的时候被警察抓到了。 突然之间，警察神奇地说：“你是什么人？你干什么的？”在我的里面跳出一句神的话：“我们都是被拣选的族类，我们都是神的儿女。”我就宣告我是天上人。当时警察说：“天上人，那你住在什么地方？”圣灵在我的里面有个声音说：“你住在福音村。”
In the book about his life, The Heavenly Man, the book details how he was persecuted in China for his faith. Thrown into solitary confinement, his legs crushed so that he would never walk again. But amazingly, God healed him. He stood up and actually walked out of a maximum security prison.
I
said to Jesus, this is a security prison. You don't walk out from places like this. Jesus said to me immediately, your prison is real. But I am the truth, and the truth will set you free. Hallelujah. I'm standing here as a living testimony. This Jesus is alive.
So not many people know this man. If Brother Yun is the heavenly man, then Brother Ren is the earthly man. And I promise you, he is one of the most mysterious people you will ever meet in your entire life. When it comes to revival, few people have ever had as much impact on world missions as Brother Ren.
What is significant about Jerusalem? Jerusalem is a city where the entire history of the world has been brought together. This is the place where it all started. This was the city of the kings, but it's also the place where Jesus started his ministry.
耶路撒冷这个名字啊，你第一次什么时候听说过了？你小的时候有没有听说过？
父亲是癌症，
对，
医生说宣布他完了，再有2个礼拜就要死掉。妈妈在愁苦中悬梁自尽。后来他遇见了神说：“神说，孩子不要怕，你不要放弃，不要放弃，回家吧。” 耶稣能够医治你的先生，围绕着父亲的床前，那我们祷告父亲的病得到了医治。我们存着感恩的心，想要知道这个耶稣到底是谁。一个夜晚，我听到主在呼唤我的名字：“你起来，向西向南传福音，为耶稣做见证，就是要把福音传回耶路撒冷。”那个时候，我遇见神的时候，我已经有圣经了。我读圣经的时候，我才明白是要往耶路撒冷来传福音的。所以神对我的呼召。
So most people, when they come to Jerusalem, they hire a tour agent that takes them around to different areas. Not us. We went into some of the places that we're trying to drive around the city to discover, ending up in at different sites at the exit instead of the entrance. But actually, this right here is not the right entrance. This is the entrance that's locked. We had searched all over for the Pool of Siloam. We found it. There was one group that was talking a little loud, and so we weren't able to really hear what was being said on the mic. I'll stop. So we asked them, could they move down a little bit? So the guy, Eli Shokrom or something like that, he had actually discovered the Pool of Siloam in 2004. And we told him, hey, can you move over? You're in our shot. This is a pool that is actually mentioned in John chapter 9. For us, it has a lot of significance. Jesus sees a blind man, and the disciples ask Jesus, why is that man blind? In the Mosaic teachings, they saw that anybody that rejected God, their children and their children's children would be cursed with some of the most horrible things. One of those was possibly blindness. And Jesus said it was neither because his parents sinned or because he sinned, but because my glory could be revealed. And because the blind man couldn't see, his sense of hearing was heightened. So think about this for a minute.
You're blind. You've been blind your entire life. And now you're standing in front of the man that you hope can heal you. You're waiting for that beautiful prayer. And in that moment,
Jesus used the very thing that was used to curse him, to bless him, and to heal him. Once he was healed, he didn't have a theology. He wasn't able to go back to the Torah and explain what took place with him. Actually, he went straight to his village. And in verse 8, we see that his neighbors start to come around and say, aren't you the blind man? Aren't you the one that was blind? Even when the religious authorities come over and they start to challenge him and they say, is he the Messiah? Is he the sinner? What are your thoughts? And he says, I don't know whether he's a sinner or not. All I know is that I was blind, but now I see. Us as Christians, we don't have to be these great scholars or great theologians in order to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Just have our simple testimony, and that's what he had.
the Son of God did ministry. He didn't just talk about it, he did it. He is our example for a life of action lived in the Spirit. Does that make sense? There's one place that has always sparked my curiosity that I've wanted to see for myself. It's the place where Jesus revealed himself to his disciples for the very first time.
We are driving north right now, heading up to the place where Banias Park is.
A couple of simple questions first led me to Jerusalem, and now I find myself walking in the footsteps of Jesus in the northern tip of Israel.
Jesus and his disciples didn't just walk next door to Caesarea Philippi. This area is about a 25-35 mile walk from where they were. So it was quite a venture. Not only that, but this region actually was dedicated to the worship of the Pan god. Each one of these little inlets into the rock would have been for a different deity. This actually represents the gods of the Gentiles. No respectable Jew would ever come here to be in the shadow of the rock of the gods. But it is here that Jesus asks his disciples, "Who do man say that I am?" Some people that say that you're Jeremiah, some that are saying that you are Elijah, some are saying that you are John the Baptist. And then Jesus asks more directly, "Who do you say that I am?" And then Simon Peter, not an educated man, a fisherman, says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, it was not flesh and bone. It was not man that gave this to you, Simon, but it came from the Father. And upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. One of the amazing things what's actually taking place here is imagery. There's a cave. It's one of the most prominent features in this mountain right here. Right here in the middle where the temple of Pan was, that was called the gate to Hades. And it was believed that the gods could actually have access to Hades through these gates right here. And Jesus is using this imagery, saying that upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
This was the first time that we see the word church in the Bible. He didn't say temple or synagogue. He used the word church.
You know, for generations, the Catholics have taught that actually this was the commission of Peter. This was the anointing of Peter to become the leader of the church. The Protestants believe that actually it was the confession. And in the shadow of this, it makes so much more sense. Jesus is bringing his disciples to the darkest place of all Judea and revealing to them the truth of who he is and saying, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. What if Jesus is still telling those that follow him the same thing? Those that go into North Korea, those that go into Iran, those that go into the areas that have never heard the good news of Jesus Christ and say, upon this rock, this truth that I am the Christ, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
On the drive back down to Jerusalem, it came into perspective. During the days of Jesus, was the rock of the gods, was that the representation of everything wrong with the world? Like the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the topsy-turvy of right and wrong. Where is revival needed most? Is it for the Ted Flanders or Homer Simpson? Did Jesus come for the righteous or sinners? Is the gospel for the pretty and tidy parts of the world, or for the broken and miserable? Those that are crying out in desperation.
When you think about the challenge of the presence of very strong force of darkness, we believe that only one who can do any difference in that region is Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the Prince of Peace.
我们回来原来的这个大使命开始的地方啊。
在耶稣没有钉十字架之前，耶稣跟门徒有一个约定啊，说鸡打牧人，羊群分散。当我从死里复活了以后，有一个山是我所约定的那座山，就是这座山。门徒们一来到这座山上聚集的时候，耶稣一开始说：“我告诉你们，天上地下所有的权柄都已经在我这里了。你们去，给万民听。信而受洗的必然得救。你们要去做什么？传福音，去做什么？不但是叫人相信，而且是万民做耶稣的门徒。门徒领受了这个圣灵的能力，不害怕，死就死吧，没有放弃这个勇敢的心。所以你们领受这个能力要去，是万民做我的门徒，奉圣父、圣子、圣灵的名给他们施洗。凡我所吩咐的，你都去教训人，去遵守。
And wherever His name is proclaimed, wherever with authority and with power, the darkness will go away. It have to run away, and the light will shine.
But if the disciples were to go into the darkest areas of the world, doesn't Jesus know that they will most likely be killed? When these men chose to follow the example of Jesus, they were essentially signing their own death warrant. But is that true Christianity? Oh man, this is the opposite of the safe Christian life that I have always known. Who knows where this crazy road will lead?
I've got this lonely table, so I don't have to worry about offending people around me.